yoga had to be taken up together. We finished shlokas 11 to 14 together last time, exploring the relationship between breath and mind. We understood that and breath begin from the same source. They are like two branches of one tree, and the trunk of the tree is Maya Shakti. So because they are so closely connected to each other, through the breath we can control the mind, and through the mind we can control the breath. We also practiced two kinds of pranayama or breathing techniques. One is the breath, and Antar Pranayama, where we said, who am I? We said, I am not this, Naham Deham, while we exhaled, and we said, while we inhaled, and during the natural pause between inhalation and exhalation, we said, I am that, so hum. Then we also saw that there are ways of keeping the mind quiet. One way is through laya, that is temporary suspension of the mind, which happens during deep sleep, naturally to all of us. Sleep, there is no feeling of I am the body, mind, and intellect, and the identities with which we are all so familiar in our waking state are all missing in deep sleep state. So that's the natural laya state, temporary suspension of the mind. Also, when we control the breath and the mind becomes quiet and thoughtless after some time, that is also temporary suspension of the mind. So the mind comes back after a while, and all the vasanas come back into play. That is one way of quietening the mind. Then Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi said, there is another way of quietening the mind, that is through nasha, mano nasha, where we actually destroy the mind. That destruction of the mind is only dropping off the thought of I am the body, mind, and intellect. Otherwise, the thinking capacity, analysis, decision-making capacity, the memory, all these factual, functional parts of the mind act even better. They are more efficient than before. When we have dropped the I am the BMI thought. This is called no mind state or destruction of the mind. So when we have brought the mind to a state of submission by using breath, Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi said, at that time, making use of the cooperation of the mind, ask the question, who am I? Or become established in the self and drop the identity of I am the body. So this is the summary of the 4 shlokas that we covered last time. I will now go to the presentation. Share the presentation with all of you so that, where do I share the presentation?
Click share content, madam.
Okay, 1 minute. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see it? Oh, just wait a minute. Yeah. Can
Yes. 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 Yes.
See it.
thank you. Okay. So we'll just chant the 14 shlokas and move on to the 15th shloka. So I'll chant and we'll repeat together. Shloka 13. Laya vinashane ubhayarodhane vinashane ubhayarodhane layagatam punar bhavati nomratam layagatam punar bhavati nomratam. So this is what we just discussed. Suspend or temporary merger and destruction are 2 ways to achieve mind control. of these, the suspended mind emerges. The destroyed mind is dead and will never emerge. So that is what is called Jivan Mukti, or this we already covered last time. Out of the 4 functions of the mind called Manas, which generates thoughts, Buddhi, which is nothing but Viveka or discrimination, Ahankara, the body, mind and intellect, Chitta, which is factual memory, who am I will remove the thought, and who am I also goes, and over a period of practice, I am I, the false identity is stopped, and Ahankara becomes just a functional entity, no longer limited by the feeling that I am the body. This is called no mind state. We chant the 14th shloka. Vandhanat Lina Manasam Pranabandhanat Lina Manasam Ekachintanat Nashametyadaha Ekachintanat Nashametyadaha. The mind that is held in suspension through breath control can be destroyed through one pointed attention to that one reality. So this also we covered last time. We looked at Adams. We looked at his example, how he moved from Manolaya to Manonasha. Now, today we are going to explore this shloka, very important shloka, both in Upadeshasaram and in Saddarshanam, which is another composition by Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi. Somewhere in the middle of the composition, he inserts a shloka where he reminds why we are doing this self-inquiry. So in this shloka, he is reminding us what is the advantage of doing self-inquiry and getting established in the self. Let's chant the shloka and then go into it. Nashtamanaso utkrit yoginah Nashtamanaso utkrishtha yoginah Krityamasti kim swasthitim yatah Krityamasti swasthitim yatah. Nashta manasa. Nashta means destruction. Manasa, the mind. By the destruction of the mind, Utkrishta yoginaha. Utkrishta is exalted, very noble, very much to be revered. Yoginaha, the yogi. The yogi who has become exalted by destroying the mind and swasthitim, and being established in the self. Krityam asti kim is action. Krityam asti, what action remains. Kim, what remains for such a yogi. So for an exalted yogi whose mind is destroyed and who is established in the self, what action or karma remains for such a sage? By asking this question, Sri is making us examine our own goal. He says, okay, you have now covered 14 shlokas of the Upadeshasaram. You have understood the subtle nuances of Karma Yoga, of Bhakti Yoga, of Raja Yoga. Very practically, you have understood the attitudes and the techniques and which superior, which is not so effective, how you should practice Karma Yoga, how you should practice Bhakti Yoga, how to use Raja Yoga, or how to get its cooperation so that you can destroy the mind, or you can drop the idea of I am the body, mind, and intellect. You've done all this. But while doing all this, many times it's possible to lose the goal. Along the way, there is a peace, there is a joy, there is a bliss that we get from the sadhana. And then there may be a temptation. Okay, I got it yesterday. I want to say peace today. I don't want to move forward because it's so nice, it's so pleasant, it's so blissful. So I want to stay at this stage of the sadhana, and I just want to go on enjoying it for some time. To feel by studying 14 shlokas, I've learned a lot by now. So I'm happy with this knowledge. Take a long time, it doesn't matter. I'm just happy. So Bhagwan is saying, don't get misled. Somebody has to mute. Can everybody mute, please? I'm hearing some noises. Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi is saying, remember, you have engaged in self-inquiry. For a yogi, there is nothing left. All the time, we get stressed because now I'm finishing one task, and then already there are 10 more tasks waiting for me. It's not that a sage or a jnani who's established in the self does not have tasks waiting for him or her. It is there. But that stress is not there. I am the doer of this task. When I feel I am the doer of this task, I'm always stressed about, will the task be done properly? Will I get the right results? What if I get wrong results from this, etc. But for a yogi, since he does not have the idea of I am the body, he does not have the idea of I am the doer, there is no stress associated with any task. So because of that, he is able to perform all tasks very clearly. He is able to very efficiently, and at the same time, he is able to perform more number of tasks, but inside he is bliss. He abides in the self. He never for a moment, what does it mean? Abiding in the self means never for a single moment, never for an instant does a jnani forget his self. Never for an instant will he come back to Deha Bhava. He never ever feels that I am this body. He never ever feels that I am the doer. These things are happening. Whatever needs to happen through this body, mind, and intellect is happening. It is happening as efficiently as it can be done. That is all. Joy that he feels is not dependent on the outcome of the action. It is not dependent on what anybody says. Does somebody praise my action, or does somebody criticize my action? That has no impact on bliss, because he is bliss. That is his true nature, and he is aware of that all the time. So when you have attained that state, remember, this is what you are doing the self-inquiry for. This yogi can be you. If you are able to identify with the self all the time, if you are able to be aware that you are the self all the time, that you are bliss and peace, and you are infinite, you are eternal, then what action remains to be done? Now I found a few parallels from Ashtavakra Gita, 2 shlokas in the 3rd chapter of the Ashtavakra Gita. So I've just shared. Dhirastu bhojyamano api pīdyamano api sarvada atmanam kevalam pashyanna tushyati na kupyati. So Ashtavakra Gita, the 9th shloka of the 3rd chapter. It says, whether feted or tormented, the wise man is always aware of his supreme self nature and is neither pleased nor disappointed. Whether he is praised or whether he is tormented, a jnani will never forget his own nature. His pleasure does not depend upon this. So he is not pleased when him, neither is he disappointed when someone criticizes him very severely, also tormented. So this is the 9th shloka. Then in the 12th shloka of the same chapter, Ashtavakra Gita says, Nispraham manasam yasya nairashye api mahatmanaha tasyatma jnana triptasya suna kena jayate. Who is to be compared to the great souled person whose mind is free of desire even in disappointment, and who has found satisfaction in self-knowledge. So normally when we get into any mode of action, we get into any mode of activity, we accomplish a task, then the result is not what we expected. So if we get disappointed, immediately what is the next thought that comes to us? I can do this or this or this to achieve the result that I want. So that means I'm not happy with this result. I'm going to work, or I'm going to find some other way, or maybe I'll find some other activity itself so that I can get out of the state of disappointment and again be happy. That is how most of us think. But for one who is established in the self, he is always tripta. Tripta means content. Santripta, ever and ever and ever content. Right? In self-knowledge. And what is that self-knowledge? I am bliss. I don't have to get happiness from outside. I am peace. Whatever happens out can never shatter this peace. I am peace. I am infinite. This body, mind, and intellect will keep on carrying out tasks according to its prarabdha karma. Whatever responsibility has to be shouldered will be shouldered, but without the feeling that I am this limited body, mind, and intellect. So we have the Upanishads, Vedas tell us every human being has 4 purusharthas. Purusharthas are 4 goals or the framework in which our life, 4 more, which will decide how our life progresses, how we live our life. So, though we actually get moksha or liberation last, I have put it first because whatever we do ultimately is for moksha or liberation. Moksha or liberation is eternal happiness, eternal peace, the feeling of infinity, the liberation from returning and experience karma. So everything that we do actually should be within this framework. It is within the framework of I am ever free. I want to be free from this limitation of belief. So whatever we do should be within this framework. A person who is aware, who is walking on the path, his will come into this framework of moksha first. Whatever is done is for moksha. Whatever every activity for moksha. So goes into that category. Atmanu mokshartam jagat hitayacha. Whatever I do is for my liberation and for the welfare of the world. Proclamation of every sadhak. So then we have dharma. This dharma will come within the framework of moksha. My life earning, etc. And then we have kama or desire. So all the desires, if we go to a sage for blessings, normally the sage will say, may all your dharmic desires be fulfilled.
Madam, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We missed you on this slide. We could
You
not
can't
hear
see
you.
me, is it? You can't see the slide, is it?
No. When you started with the slide, we did not get your voice. Can you start again with this slide, madam?
So you couldn't hear me, is it?
Yes.
From the beginning of the slide.
From this slide, which starts with dharma.
Okay, I'll say it again. So normally 4 Purusharthas, the Upanishads or Vedas, tell us that for a human being, there are 4 goals which will define our lives. So these are called 4 Purusharthas. So the 4 Purusharthas are Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. But usually for sadhak, the last one, the moksha or liberation, will become the first framework. Because whatever I do, when I am a seeker, when I am an ardent seeker, when I am a committed seeker, and I have determined that whatever I do, I want to move towards liberation. I want to drop this idea that I am the body, mind, and intellect. So any activity that I do will be for moksha, where I'm anything that I do will be done from that perception that I want moksha. So any action can become a sadhana when I do it within this framework of moksha. So there is a, whenever we sit for sadhana, normally sadhaks are asked to say, Atmanu mokshartham jagat hitayacha. Atmanu, for me, from this sadhana, I want liberation. At the same time, why do I want liberation? Because I want to participate in the welfare of the world. Jagat hitayacha. So when I'm able to drop the limited identity of I am the body, mind, and intellect, and I discover my true nature, I uncover my true nature, then automatically whatever jnana I have gained, I will share it with the world for its welfare. So that is Atmanu Mokshartham Jagat Hitayacha. So within this framework of moksha, there will be a dharma. Keeping moksha as the foremost goal in my life, I will also do other things. I have to earn my livelihood. So I have to accumulate money or wealth or property enough to be comfortable in life, enough to support anybody who is dependent on me. But that should be within the framework of dharma. I should not hurt anybody through that. I should not do unrighteous activities in order to earn wealth. And then there is kama. So whenever I was just saying, when we go to a Mahatma for blessings, for darshan and blessings, the Mahatma will normally say, may your dharmic desires be fulfilled. It does not say, may all your desires be fulfilled. It is important to have the ceiling of dharma within which we have desires. By fructification of that desire, by implementation of that desire, I should not hurt anybody. I should not bring about calamities to the world. I should not spoil society. People around me should not get into trouble. I should not get into unethical, implementing unethical desire. So these 4 frameworks govern the life of a normal human being. But for a jnani who is established in the self, moksha or liberation already achieved. So that is not a goal. He is beyond freedom and bondage. Neither bound nor free, because he is ever free. He is the self. Then what desires will he have? He is happy all the time because he is bliss. His nature itself is bliss. His nature itself is peace. His nature itself is completeness. He is whole. He is infinite. So it does. Normally, we need a desire to make us feel whole. We feel incomplete. So we get a desire. We feel by fulfilling that desire, we will become complete. For a while, we feel complete. Then again, we start feeling incomplete. We want something else. And we run after fulfilling that desire. But for a jnani, he never feels incomplete because he's always whole. So no kama. Artha, he has found the greatest treasure. The greatest treasure called the self is established in his true nature. So whether wealth comes, wealth does not come, he is not bothered. So for such a sage, what activity remains? That is the question that Ramana Maharshi is placing in front of us. Is my voice clear now?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So when we walk on the beach, on wet sand, when we walk on wet mud, what happens? This picture we see footprints behind, right? When we walk on a wet surface that is not firm, we leave footprints behind. So this is what can happen to us. What is happening, in fact, all the time. Every thought that comes into the mind, every experience that we have, every emotion that we have, it leaves behind footprints as long as I feel that I am the doer of that action. I feel I am performing this action. I got this wonderful idea. I did this. Therefore, I deserve praise for it, or I will take the blame for what goes wrong. I am making this decision. So as long as I have this feeling of I am doing this at whichever level, mental, intellectual, physical, emotional, I feel this way. Till then, it will leave a vasana behind, it will leave a residue. Vasana only means residue. It leaves a residue behind it. What is this residue? I keep on getting angry with somebody very frequently, very often. What will happen? I will develop a tendency which will give me a short temper. So that is the residue. It keeps on leaving residues, and then that will become a tendency within me. And this tendency will play as though somebody is pressing a remote button. Sometimes children come and they play around like that with us. Deliberately, they say things to make us angry because they know that as soon as they say that word or phrase, it makes us angry. We retort. And then they find that funny. So this is how we build up vasanas, because it leaves residues. The residue is because I feel I am doing it. And the doership is because I'm identifying with the instruments of action, with the body, mind, and intellect. What about jnanis? What about somebody who's established in the self? He is like a bird in the sky. Thousands of birds, millions of birds fly in the sky every day. Imagine if they left tracks behind them. The sky would be full of bird tracks and we would not be able to see the blue of the sky at all. But all the time we are seeing the sky because the birds don't leave any tracks behind. So since the jnani does not ever feel, even for an instant, that is instruments, the body, mind, and intellect, so he has no sense of doership. He feels it is happening. His actions leave no residues or vasanas behind. They are done and it is over. The thought comes, it's required for the task, thought goes, there is no residue. Feeling comes, feeling goes, there is no residue. because there are no residues, no fresh karma can be generated. So this is a very important thing for us to understand. Now, we have read that for a jnani, all his previous karma except the prarabdha, everything is destroyed. So what do you mean by that? Actually, in residues or vasanas, there are vasanas that bind us. What are these vasanas? For all these vasanas, the main vasana, the seed vasana is, I am the instruments. I am the body, mind, and intellect. We'll be going into that more in the further slokas, so I'm not going to go into it very deeply right now. So whatever binds us, whatever disempowers us, whatever gives us that feeling that I am limited, I am only this small entity. So that all those vasanas. So around I am the body, mind, intellect vasana, so many other vasanas will group themselves. This is mine, this belongs to me, this is how I want it, these are my expectations, these are my ambitions, these are my desires, this is how I like things to be done, etc., etc., etc. So big bunches of grapes hanging on to one small seed that is called I am the body, mind, and intellect. So if we remove that main magnet to which all these iron filings are, and they keep on getting more and more will come and get stuck. If we suddenly demagnetize that magnet, it has no longer the capacity to attract iron filings. What will happen? All the iron filings on the magnet. You have these electrical magnet. If you switch on, if you allow electricity to flow through it, then it behaves like a magnet. Switch off the electricity, immediately it loses its magnetic power. So like that, if we remove I am BMI, we let go of that. Just a thought, I let go of that thought. Immediately all the residues, all the bandhavasanas that were disempowering me, that were making me feel that I am bound, that I am limited, that I am unhappy, that I don't have peace, etc., everything will fall away by removing the main magnet. I remove the magnetic power in that magnet. That's all. It is gone. Immediately all the other residues fall away. So for a jnani who is established in the self, who is always aware of his true nature, these bandha vasanas are completely destroyed. Not there at all. Gone. There is another category of residues. This is called bhoga vasanas. Bandha is ending. Bhoga is enjoyment. So these are desires for enjoyment. These don't bind. So it is not necessary that all the bhoga vasanas of a jnani should be destroyed. So some bhoga vasanas may be left. But the jnani is a witness. He is always witnessing only. So suppose old vasanas arise. Old vasanas from some other lifetime. It is there. It is arising. Not been destroyed. I want to make money. The jnani is just looking at the thought. The thought arises. The thought is gone. No traces. Over. So only those vasanas which promote the betterment of the world. I want to help the world. That is also a vasana. It's a sattvic vasana. So it arises. I want to help the world by sharing my knowledge. I want to help seekers on the path so that they too can realize their true nature. So these vasanas, the jnani may choose to implement because it will help other beings, it will help the world. So he can choose which to implement, and all the rajasic, tamasic vasanas, if any are left, They will just come without leaving this. They are gone from the Chidakasha, from the mind. So this is how vasanas or residues function in a jnani. So because of any selfish desire, a jnani will never act. So his actions never harm anybody. So this is one story that my father used to be very fond of. It was one of his favorite stories. And it fits into this theme, so I thought of including it today. It is a story of Bhagwan Buddha, which comes in Edwin Arnold's Light of Asia, the poem that he has written about Buddha's life. Many of you may have read it. So here, Bhagwan Buddha has gone into the forest and he's bathing. He's bathing in a beautiful forest pool full of lotuses. It is surrounded by trees. Many of these trees have flowers. And Buddha is bathing in this lake. So it was Buddha's custom always that whenever he bathes, normally he dips his head into the river several times. We have also bathed in rivers. So we do that, don't we? We just hold on to the nose and we go deep into the water so that we are completely inside the water, and then we come up for air again. So Buddha would do this several times when he was bathing, and it would go in a rhythm. Come up for air, go down again, come up for air, go down again. So it was a very rhythmic thing. At regular intervals, he would go down, come up. It just so happened that on that day, there was a beautiful tree at the edge of the lake, and the blossoms were just opening, very, very fragrant blossoms. Wonderful fragrance. We have also smelt parijata, we have smelt champak, we have smelt a rose. Sometimes night queen, you're walking in the evening on the road, and suddenly the breeze comes and it wafts the smell of night queen to you. What do? Such a lovely fragrance. This happened to Buddha also. He went into the water, he came up to breathe. The breeze passed by at the time, laden with the fragrance of these wonderful flowers. And he said, what a lovely fragrance. Second breath, third breath. Normally, one breath and he is back in the water. Then he remembers, he has to go into the water. He goes down. Again, he comes back. He takes a longer interval breathing in the fragrance. And then again, he goes back into the water. When he comes back the third time like this, he hears a Asharira Vani. He hears a disembodied voice. He doesn't know from where it's coming, but he can hear a voice. The voice says, stop. Buddha says, who is calling me a thief? What have I stolen? I'm just bathing in this lake. I haven't stolen anything. And the voice says, oh yes, you have. You stole the fragrance of the flower just now. What do you mean? I'm bathing. The breeze brought the fragrance to me. I just enjoyed the fragrance. That's all. The voice said, you had a rhythm. Remember? Go into the water, come up, one breath, go back into the water, come up, one breath. What happened to that rhythm? Why did you break it? Why did you stand outside the water for 3 breaths, 4 breaths, 5 breaths? You have taken more than your share of the fragrance. Somebody else will get less because of what you did now. Buddha begins to laugh. What is this ridiculous thing? Look there. There is another man who comes to this lake every day. He plunders the lake. Hundreds of lotuses he just cuts from their stem. He fills it into his boat and he takes it away to sell. If you are calling anyone a thief, maybe you should call him a thief. Me. So that voice says, I will not call him a thief, because just look at his clothes. He is wearing dark clothes. Empty another bottle of dye, red dye on his clothes, you will not see the dye, because the color of the clothes is already red. But your mind is pure. That man's mind, it is still very crude. It has to get refined. It's not the clothes. Clothes are an example. The mind is full of tamas and rajas. So at his level, he is not stealing. But at your level, you are going to become a bodhisattva. You are going to become a Buddha of the world, the enlightened one. Your mind is like a pure white cloth. One small dot, one small speck on that pristine purity is very, very visible. So you have to be careful. This is a bhoga vasana, desire for enjoyment. It is fine, implementing is fine, but you are taking more than your fair share. Be careful. So you can think of this Pariyavani maybe as an amplified voice of the conscience. So Buddha at this time is doing severe penance in order to become enlightened. Such are the strict standards. Would we ever think we are walking on the road, we get the smell of flowers or we get the smell of masala dosa from somebody's house? Nothing of taking in a few breaths. For us, stealing or theft, they mean very different things from that. But the subtler a jnani becomes, the subtler a sadhak becomes. When a jnani is established in the self, the bhoga vasanas that are left, they will never be implemented if they are not sattvic, if they don't promote the welfare of the world. The yardstick is so subtle, so sensitive. This is the yardstick of a jnani. He will never hurt or deprive anyone of anything, even though he implements a vasana for enjoyment. It will never deprive anybody of something. Now this story, Manisha Panchakam, most of you will have read. The story of Shankaracharya and the Chandala. There are different viewpoints about it, different opinions about this. Some people say it actually happened in the life of Shankaracharya. Some people say it did not happen, but it is there included in the biography of Shankaracharya. So we can just take it as an example. Once it so happened, Shankaracharya, who was the proponent of Advaita Vedanta, which means that the self is the substratum of everything. Everything that exists is an expression of the self. Nothing can be apart from the self. So he has bathed in the Ganga river. He is in Kashi. With his disciples. After the bath, he is walking towards the temple of Lord Vishwanatha. At that time, a Chandala is a person who is in charge of cremating dead bodies. So in those times, a Chandala was considered to be of a very low caste. So touching a Chandala means you get polluted. You have to go and bathe again. So those were the belief systems held in those times. So Shankaracharya is coming, and if you remember, if you have ever been to Kashi, the lanes of Kashi are very narrow. Difficult for person to pass another. Plus the Chandala is having 4 dogs with him. So touching a dog also may pollute you. So Shankaracharya wants to pass the Chandala, but the Chandala is not stepping aside. So Shankaracharya says, go away, step aside. And then the Chandala says, what should move away? Should this body, which is made of food, move away from your body, which is made of food also? You are a proponent of Advaita Vedanta. You are teaching everybody that everything is the self. So should myself, which is consciousness, move away from yourself, which is consciousness? There is no personal pronoun that can be attached to self. I can't say myself and yourself. We are talking about self with capital S. There is only one self. So how can the self move away from the self? And he says, the Chandala continues to say, is there any difference in the reflection? The sun is reflected in many different surfaces. Sun can be reflected in the Ganges river in which you just bathe, or it can be reflected in the dirty water, the street which is occupied by outcasts. Does that make any difference to the sun? Sun remains as he is, no matter where he is reflected. You have a pot, you have a golden pot, you have a earthen pot. Is there any difference in the space that is inside a golden pot and inside an earthen pot? Shankaracharya is struck dumb. He says, it's true. This Chandala is spouting Advaita Vedanta, subtle points of Advaita Vedanta, which is showing me that my belief that somebody is of a lower caste and somebody is of a higher caste, it cannot stand in the light of Advaita Vedanta. And when I know that there is only the self, how can I cling on to these caste practices? So it falls to the feet of the Chandala, and it is presumed that the Chandala is Lord Shiva and the 4 dogs are the 4 Vedas. And he composes on the spot Manisha Panchakam. Manisha means great conviction. What is the great conviction? That self is the only reality. Panchakam, 5 shlokas. So he composes them on the spot. And this Bandha Vasana, that somebody else belongs to a lower caste, I belong to a higher caste. This Bandha Vasana is destroyed. So subtly, the cosmos will come and destroy even small seeds which have not been destroyed. The small Bandhavasana seeds which have not been destroyed will get destroyed. So just to see what are the characteristics, I've just taken Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Ramana Maharshi, a few instances. From Ramakrishna Paramahamsa's, we will look at Ramakrishna's compassion and how honest he was all the time. There is great psychological honesty in a jnani. Never for any reason will a jnani utter a lie even to himself. So first we are going to look at 2 instances of compassion. On the left upper corner of the slide, you will see a photograph that is Mathur Babu. He was the son-in-law of Rani Rasmani, who was the owner of the Kali temple. After her death, he became the manager. He was a son-in-law, so he became the manager of the temple. He was a disciple of Swami Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and he would try to take care of all his needs. One day he was going on a pilgrimage to Kashi, so he took Ramakrishna also along with him on the pilgrimage. Both are going. Then on the way, they come to Devghar, the village. They wanted to visit a temple there, so they stayed for a couple of days in that village. Then below the photo of Mathur Babu, you see these villagers. So these villagers in that village, they were so thin and emaciated, they're practically like walking skeletons. And the heart of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was moved very deeply. He said, please do something for them. Mathur was a very rich, very wealthy man. So he said, please give them some money, please give them a set of clothes, feed them one good meal before we leave. Mathur Babu says, no, Thakur, that becomes very expensive, no? How can I simply keep spending money like that? So at that time, then once again, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa requests him, he doesn't agree. So he says, all right, all of you go to Kashi, I will stay here with these villagers. And he goes and sits with them. He says, I will also stay with them. I will see whatever I can do to help them, I will do. And I will share their poverty with them. Like a child, he is not ready to get up and move. He becomes very stubborn like a child. So then Mathur Babu, he agrees. He feeds the villagers, he gives them some money, he gives them some clothes. Then they move on in the pilgrimage. So for a sage or a jnani, people are not different from him. No other being is different from him. So because of that, when somebody is in trouble, he does his utmost to help them. His compassion just flows out to them. And the same compassion knows how to deal with temperaments of different devotees. So many kinds of devotees will come to a Sadguru. Some will be rich, some will be poor, some are very independent thinkers, some are very obedient, some have a lot of surrender. Some people find it very difficult to surrender. So for each, the Jnani has to use a different approach. So among all the students who came to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, there was this Girish Chandra Ghosh. At that time, he was a very famous actor. He used to act in all the popular plays of Bengal. So he became a lay disciple of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. One of his main problems was that he was an alcoholic. He would keep on drinking alcohol. So many disciples, co-disciples, they came and told Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Thakur, you should not allow him to come here anymore. He is not fit to associate with all the other disciples. He comes drunk. Is that good? Is it? People, what will people talk about you? They will say, Ramakrishna's disciples come there drunk, alcoholics, it will give you a bad name and all that. So then Ramakrishna Paramahamsa said, no, there is a different way I have to deal with Girish Chandra Ghosh. I'm not going to forbid him. So it came to a state where Girish Chandra Ghosh would bring alcohol. He would sit in front of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and he would sip alcohol. So Ramakrishna Paramahamsa told him, Girish, you don't have to stop drinking. You know, everybody is telling me that to tell you not to drink, but I will not tell you that. Please continue to drink. It's okay. But remember, I am sitting there in your heart. You have accepted me as your Sadguru. So I am sitting there inside. Whatever you take is offered to me as Naivedyam. It is an offering to me. Whatever you eat, I will also get, because I'm inside you. Whatever you drink, I will also get. So offer that drink to me mentally. You take it as prasad. So Girish is sitting there. He says, okay, Thakur. He takes up the wine. He's not able to take a sip. His mind does not agree to offer this to the Sadguru as Naivedya. And he gives up drinking. So in this way, a Jnani will deal in different ways because he is empathetic. He's compassionate. Nobody is different. They're all expressions of his own self. So he doesn't hate somebody or love someone else. So he knows exactly how to deal with each disciple differently, how to get past that conditioning that is blocking that disciple from progressing on the path, how to deactivate that vasana, and he does it also. Then the honesty of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, there are some examples. One devotee used to bring a lemon. Whenever he came to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he knew Paramahamsa took some lemon juice now and then for his health. So he would bring a lemon and give it to him. And Ramakrishna would accept it gladly and use it. So one day, this devotee has brought the lemon as usual to offer it to him. And he offers it. Ramakrishna is about to take it. Then he says, no, I can't take this lemon today. I don't know. My body is not accepting it. Something is repelling me. I'm not able to take that lemon. I feel this lemon is stolen. The devotee says, no. This is in my in a garden of people whom I know. I have told them that I will bring this lemon. Every time I go there, I pluck a lemon and bring it to you. There are many trees. They are okay with it. They have agreed to that. It is not stolen, Thakur. So Ramakrishna says, I don't know. You please go and find out. So this man goes, while going back home, he goes out, he knocks at the door of his friend's house and finds there is somebody else living there. That person says, we recently bought over this property. The old owners have gone and now we live here. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was so honest that he was able to sense this lemon has not been obtained by taking permission from the owner. Then once it so happened that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had a stomachache, and one of his devotees was an Ayurvedic doctor, and that person happened to be there in front of him. So when Paramahamsa said, I have a little stomachache, the Ayurvedic doctor said, why don't you come to my dispensary around 3 o'clock or something in the afternoon? I will keep the medicine ready and I will hand it over to you myself. So Ramakrishna says, I will come and take it from your hands. So he goes in the afternoon, he goes to the dispensary. The doctor has kept the medicine ready, but he is not there. So when the person who is in the clinic says, please take the medicine, the doctor has said that he will kept it ready and he told me to hand it over to you. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa says, I cannot take it because I told the doctor I will take it from your hands. So I cannot accept the medicine. What I said will become a lie. To us, this may seem childish, but actually being completely honest. Many times in life, every day, we not consciously tell a lie, but we'll tell somebody, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. We call back after half an hour, or we call back the next day. We tell someone, I will definitely come there, and we don't go. So these are not conscious lies. But the more often we make such statements and we don't follow up, we don't have enough commitment to keep it up, or something comes in the way. We do this very often. And what happens is the power of speech. The speech loses its power. Its power keeps on getting depleted. Vak Shakti will keep on getting depleted. So it is very important to have Vak Shakti. For a Jnani, whatever he says, we say the blessings of a Jnani come true. Why? His Vak Shakti is very powerful. He does not utter a lie unconsciously. His Vak Shakti is so powerful that whatever he utters will happen many times. So this kind of honesty we see in most Jnanis. Here I have put up a slide of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi. There are different pictures showing animals. The first slide on the left at the top, we see Bhagwan, and then there is a cow that is touching his feet. This cow is Lakshmi. If you have gone to the ashram, you will see that next to the dining hall, there are some samadhis. So among these samadhis, we have samadhi of cow, Lakshmi the cow. It says, which is the date, I think it's something like June 17th, she attained samadhi. She actually attained mukti, Bhagwan says. So why is Lakshmi, could she attain mukti? So Bhagwan says often people, devotees who need to be close to the master, who need to focus very much on the sadhana, they can even take the bodies of animals and be reborn in such a situation that they can be close to the Sadguru. So, story of Lakshmi physically, she was brought by Arunachala Swami. There was a man called Arunachala in a nearby village. He had a dream which said his cow and a newborn calf, he should give it to Bhagwan. So he brought them to the ashram and he told Bhagwan, please take them, Bhagwan. And then at that time, ashram was really poor. And Bhagwan said, look, we ourselves are living in huts. How can I take care of a cow and a calf? What will I feed it with? How will I take care of it? People keep coming for my darshan, so I cannot get up and look after it every day. So it is not possible. Now you have come, you have offered it to me, and I will hand it over to you. You please go and bring up the cow and calf and keep it with you. The man is not ready. So there is Ramanatha Brahmachari. We have looked at his life and his experiences during one of the talks. Ramanatha Brahmachari, who was just around 4 feet tall, was a realized jnani living in the ashram. He said, Bhagwan, I will take care of the cow and the calf. So for 3 months, the cow and calf stayed there. And after that, Bhagwan felt that it is not working very well. So he gave it away to another person staying in the town, in the town of Tiruvannamalai. So he brought up the cow and calf, and that calf became big, started becoming bigger and bigger. And one day simply he brought the cow and calf together to the ashram to show them to Bhagwan. Bhagwan said, very good. And he blessed the cow and calf and he said, okay, take them back. The next day, calf came back on its own to the ashram. And every day it started coming. Morning it would get up, come to the ashram, go back in the evening. Bhagwan named it Lakshmi and he was very fond of it, and Lakshmi was so attached to Bhagwan. One day she would come actually to the ashram, and whenever it was lunchtime, she would come and lead Bhagwan into the dining hall. She knew exactly when it was 11 o'clock, Bhagwan's lunch time. She would come and stand there and take Bhagwan to the dining hall. And one day she just came and stood there, and Bhagwan was reading a newspaper, and Bhagwan said, Amma, what do you want? She would not move. She started licking the newspaper. So Bhagwan kept the newspaper aside. He said, you want me to pay attention to you? Okay, come here. So he hugged her and he kept his face against her face, and he stayed like that for 10 to 15 minutes. And all the devotees said, Bhagwan, Lakshmi is shedding tears. Tears were simply pouring down from Lakshmi's eyes, and Bhagwan said, she is in a state of samadhi, don't you know? She is a very advanced sadhak. So after this, slowly Lakshmi had a calf and she shifted to the ashram. So a Goshala started in the ashram. She had 9 calves there in that ashram. And finally, when she attained samadhi, Bhagwan came and placed his hand on her forehead and on her heart for some time before she died. And then when he was sure that her mind is fully focused on the Sadguru, he went away and then he attained mukti. Bhagwan herself said Lakshmi has been liberated. So this we may think is a stray case, but wild animals and domestic animals are deeply attached to Bhagwan. One day Bhagwan is just sitting in the hall and people are seeing that a scorpion is climbing up Bhagwan's body from the front. There is another scorpion climbing down from the back. Everybody says, Bhagwan, Bhagwan, scorpion, scorpion. It's okay. Just be, it's fine. So both of them climbed over and then disappeared. Instead, they felt that this body was like a wall. If they're climbing on a wall, will they bite the wall? It's a very neutral, natural thing for them. If there is no fear in you, then animals will not harm you. Snakes sometimes would just crawl over Bhagwan and go away. So one day, there was this monkey of Nondi. His name is Nondi. Bhagwan called him Nondi because he was limping. So this monkey was pushed down from a very tall tree near Skandashram, where Bhagwan was staying at that time, and it broke its leg. So Bhagwan took in that monkey and he tied up a bandage around the leg and he took care of the monkey. Monkey got so attached to him, he would limp after Bhagwan everywhere. And after some time, the tribe of monkeys to which he belonged, they came back. The elder of that monkey, the leader of that monkey, had pushed this Nondi from the tree because he was scared. Nondi was becoming very powerful. He would take over the kingship. But now he had come to invite Nondi back into the tribe. All the tribe monkeys were there. And they're inviting Nondi. You can see Nondi in this slide. Second photograph after Lakshmi. So Nondi sat on Bhagwan's lap and he refused to go. Bhagwan could understand what animals spoke and they could understand what. So he told Nondi, no, see, your tribe has come. How long will you stay with me? You have to go back, right? Sometime or the other. They themselves are coming and calling you, go, you'll be okay. When you become king, come back, don't forget us. So he went. And after some months, he brought his tribe back. He had become the king. So then Bhagwan made all the monkeys sit in a row and plantain leaves were placed in front of them and a meal was served to every monkey. Nondi would keep coming and visiting Bhagwan often. He would sit next to Bhagwan, sometimes eat from Bhagwan's or sometimes ask for a new leaf to be put in front of him and he would eat from that. The same kind of consideration which Bhagwan gave human beings, which Bhagwan gave VIPs, he would give to animals, he would give to plants. So there was no difference in the way he treated different beings. All living beings were treated in the same way by Ramana Maharshi. So we have other photographs. Monkeys sometimes would come. They would bring newborn monkeys and give it to Bhagwan to bless. He would bless that monkey baby, small baby. He would give a banana to that monkey mother and send them away. And when people brought offerings to the ashram, bananas, etc., monkey would come inside and steal a banana. Then Bhagwan would, and attendants would try to drive away the monkey. Then Bhagwan would say, come, take it. Take and go away quickly before they drive you out. So this is the way he related to all animals. There was a white peacock sent by the ashram by Rani from Rajasthan. So this peacock was so attached to Bhagwan, she would sleep in the same room as Bhagwan. She would follow him around everywhere. Then there was Jackie the dog. We see the picture of the dog also here. Jackie the dog would, whatever Bhagwan said, it would understand and do. And Bhagwan never said to any animal. He would say he or she. So he told Jackie, when Jackie used to bark at other dogs, he would say, keep quiet, sit down, keep quiet, close your eyes. If you don't see that dog, you won't feel like barking, right? Sit down. the dog would sit straight and close its eyes, just like Bhagwan said, and it would stop barking. And Bhagwan had to feed the dog. Bhagwan had to take a mouthful of food from the dog's food, and only then the dog would eat it. Otherwise, he would not eat the food at all. So this was the kind of relationship Bhagwan had with so many different animals. Not only with animals, with human beings also. Sometimes shepherds who he had met when he was walking on the hills earlier, they would come. And Bhagwan might be sitting with a so-called VIP, but if he sees a poor shepherd outside, he will excuse himself, get up, go outside, talk to him. If that cowherd has or shepherd has brought him some ragi ganji, he will take that ganji in his hands and drink it. So consideration and love was for everybody all the time. This was the state in which he was there. We think that no mind state might be making a jnani inefficient, but if we look at Bhagwan's life, 2:30 in the morning, he would cook in the kitchen. I didn't find any photos where Bhagwan is cooking, only one where he's eating. He would cook with such great care. Every dish should taste good. And then when it is served to him, he will mix everything together and just finish eating it. So somebody said, Bhagwan, why are you eating like that? He will say, for me, actually, there is no raga and which I like this, I don't like this, I don't feel any such thing. So whatever I eat anyway is nice to me. I just mix and finish it off. But while cooking for other people, 100% care is taken to make every dish so good, so nice. One day, you see a photo of Bhagwan on the Bhagwan had the habit of walking on the hill for long hours in the beginning. So one day he's walking on the hill and he sees a very big banyan tree, huge leaves. And there is a stream there in front of it. So he thinks, I'll cross this stream and go and see that tree. And when he is walking, he places his foot in a hornet's nest. Nest is on the ground in the bush. He doesn't, and his leg goes right into a hornet's nest. A hornet can sting very badly. So immediately the leg which has gone into the nest, hornets, the insects, will climb all over his leg and they start biting him very badly. And he says only the leg which went into the nest, they bit. The other leg which was outside, they didn't even come and sit on that leg. And he said, because I had made a mistake, unconsciously, unknowingly, but I had harmed the hornets. So he stood there with his leg in the nest. He let the hornets bite. For as long as they wanted to bite, he let them bite. Then, when their anger is over, when they have finished biting, then he took out his leg, and his leg had swollen up. It had become really very big because of the what is injected by the sting of the wasp, of the hornet. Then he went back to the ashram and somebody picked out all the stings and they asked Bhagwan, why didn't you immediately take out your leg and come? He said, it's not the right thing to do. I had made a mistake. I had injured them. That karma has to be discharged, right? Then and there I allowed that karma to get discharged. They finished biting me. There is a lot of pain. My leg is swollen up. I had only compassion for them all the time, but they were hurt, so they wanted to bite me. And that incident is karmic also close. So jnanis would come, they would ask Bhagwan to explain scriptures to them. Bhagwan would go and inspect buildings. We see there's a sketch here. Bhagwan would often build walls, benches, embankments. Once Rangaswamy, a person who his devotee was also working on the temple of the mother. Both of them were carrying stones so that walls could be built. And Rangaswamy hurt his finger. So Bhagwan said, you take rest. Today I will carry your stones and my stones. So both he carried and he took it there. He had no feeling do this, I should not do this. There is no work that he did not do from morning till starting at 2:30 till 12 o'clock in the night. He was so busy in some task or the other, writing books, proofreading, binding books. Children would bring their toys to him. Children loved Bhagwan, so they would bring torn books, broken toys. He would mend all that and give it to them. He had time for everybody, space for everybody. Non-stop work, physically also, mentally also. He would be working, he would be teaching people, he would be sharing his knowledge, he would be cooking in the kitchen. So all the time he was engaged. Whatever he did very efficiently, very perfectly, no compromises. So by looking at Ramana Maharshi's life, understand that even when mind is destroyed, when the BMI thought is dropped, the efficiency of a person goes up, it does not come down. And for him, he said, there are no others for me. Because in the self, there are no others. Everybody is a part of my own self. And this state where Ajnani is completely established in the self, he is peace, he is silence, he is love, he is bliss, but outside, he is able to carry out all transactions, all activities in the outer world. So this state is called Sahaja Samadhi, where there is no compartment. There are no compartments in a Jnani's life. Whatever he is inside does not get diluted, does not get contaminated. That is why Jnani is called Niranjana, stainless one. No contamination can come and dilute the bliss and peace and love. By looking at these different instances, we understand what is the no mind state. How does a Jnani behave if he is in a no mind state? How does life move on for a person who is established in the self? Transactionally, it moves on as it did before, with greater efficiency, maybe, with complete unconditional love. The bliss which is inside also goes out and reaches other people. The peace which is inside goes out and reaches other people. Whoever came to the presence of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi, their minds became quiet. For some time at least, they could experience their true nature. I would experience as a word. They could realize their true nature. Maybe they slipped back again afterwards, but they understood what sadhana to do. Many people got enlightened in his presence. Many stayed on in the ashram and they continued their sadhana under his guidance so that they could become established in the self. So in this shloka, Bhagwan is reminding us, you are doing self-inquiry. Your whole life has to go on within this framework of moksha. I am the self and I need to get established in my true nature. I need to get established in my true nature so that this wisdom can be shared with all those who are also walking on the same path. This is what Bhagwan wants to remind us in the 15th sloka. So I will just come out of the presentation. If there are any questions, type them in the chat. After that, we'll do 5 minutes of sadhana. How do I look at the chat?
Madam, go to that participants icon at the bottom.
Okay, okay.
right next to that participants icon, you will see the chat box.
Okay. For pure mind, even the smallest of improper thing is visible to them, highly amplified. And even if they do it not knowing, they lament and say low of themselves like Mani Vachakar. Okay. Yeah. Very subtle mind. So very subtle, very sattvic mind. They would not like to, even by an unconscious action, give pain to anyone. That's true. Hello, ma'am. Are there any jnanis existing in body in today's world? I'm sure there are many, many jnanis. They may not proclaim. No jnani will tell you, I am a jnani. In their presence, your mind becomes quiet. My own Sadguru, Sri Narasimha Prabhuji, who is the founder of Light of the Self Foundation, who is guiding me in the path of Atma Vichara. He is also a jnani, a wonderful guide who is able to clear all my doubts and put me on the path of sadhana very effectively. There are many, many jnanis in the world. Yes, even today. What, in your view, is the best way to silence our mind? I think we have gone through Manolaya, Manonasha, even last time. Silencing the mind is not the goal of sadhana. Silencing the mind is only a temporary part. It is one stage. What is important is to remove the wrong belief, the wrong thought that I have, which I have nourished from so many lifetimes, which I have been nourishing in this lifetime also, that I am the body, mind, and intellect. I am the instruments. If we remove that, if we drop that wrong identification, automatically mind is silenced. And it is silenced effortlessly. It is silenced permanently. Only task-related thoughts will come and go. There will be no compulsive thinking in the mind. There is only witnessing and there is only silence. So the best way is to drop the wrong identity. What is the significance of placing the hand on the head and the heart of a person who is dying? Okay. At the time of death, what Bhagavan Sri Ramana Maharshi said is, at the time of death, the entire lifetime will pass in front of the mind, or in the Chidakasha, Chit Akasha, the space of the mind. It's like a video, an entire video containing the essence of this life's experiences journey will pass in the mind of the person who is on the verge of death. So when this is happening, when this video is happening, when this movie is happening in the mind, it is very easy for the person who is dying to become attached to something. Going on. It is my own life. It's going in front of me. Oh, I wanted to make more money in this lifetime. It was not possible. Maybe in my next lifetime I can make money. In my next lifetime I can build a better house. Maybe in my next lifetime I may get a better spouse. So you don't know which vasana will pull and get a response from you. The minute you say, I would like to do this, or I would like to do this better, or like to do something, that person who is dying, normally Bhagwan would only go and place his hand on the head and heart of devotees who had a good deal of vasanakshaya. That means a lot of their vasanas were already gone. To his own mother he did it. And he was on the verge of death. He was able to take her to mukti. Most vasanas are already there, already gone. Bandha vasanas, most of them are gone. But a Bhoga Vasana or Bandha Vasana should not come and replay.
Please
Mute,
mute.
please. So when the person has lost most of their Bandha Vasanas, and some Bhoga Vasanas are remaining, which can pull him, or some Bandha Vasana can pull him back. At that time, if a Sadguru, Bhagwan felt that if he kept his hand, one hand on the forehead and one hand on the heart, then these Vasanas cannot reclaim the attention of that person, pull him into next life mode. Instead, attention will be fixed on the self. So attention is fixed on the self, and all the vasanas go away, they are witnessed, and they just pass away, and the person doesn't reach out to any vasana, then mukti can happen. Because whatever is witnessed will go away without leaving a trace. For which we don't show any reaction, it will go away without leaving a trace. So all of them will go away like that. Mind is focused only on the self, on the true nature, then such a person can attain mukti. I think we have completed the questions. We'll do some sadhana now. From next week, we are going to start on the Jnana Yoga and Atma Vichara proper. Bhagwan is going to guide us through what is the mind, what are the characteristics of the mind, how to the who am I sadhana. So many subtle nuances in the next 15 shlokas we are going to understand. Today, whatever we have learnt, let us implement for minutes with your spine straight. Eyes slightly closed. Observe your breathing. Watch your breath. Slow, deep breathing. Deep and slow. After each inhalation and each exhalation, there is a natural pause. It happens on its own. You don't breathe at all at that time. Without extending the pause or doing anything to it, just watch. Whenever it happens, watch the pause. Feel how quiet your mind is becoming. Every moment you are aware that you exist. Just be aware of your existence. You exist. You are aware that you exist. Stay there. You're watching the breath still. You can let go of that. The one who exists is the witness who was watching the breath, who is aware of everything. You just be in that pure state of being. I exist. I know I exist. Very effortless. It's your true state of being. Just be. You are peace. You are bliss. You are infinite. You are eternal. Let's offer our gratitude and pranams to the lotus feet of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi. May His grace nourish us, protect us. May the lamp of awareness lit by His teachings continue to burn brightly and establish us in our true nature. I thank each and every one of you for being part of this exploration. Thank you so much for your divine presence. I hand over to Sajni now.
Thank you so much, Vani. That was really amazing, so beautifully explained. And what was nice is all the anecdotes from Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa's life, from Sri Ramana's life. It really was wonderful. Thank you so much. And you ended with that very, very beautiful meditation, taking us into a state of calm and peace. So thank you so much. And before, we would like to end with the Loka Samasta, because you see, the world is really going through a lot of pain and suffering. So let us all quietly chant the Loka Samasta and send out a lot of healing light, a lot of peace and love to everyone. After all, as Sri Ramana says, we are all one. So let us start that. Okay? Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha Hari Om. Thank you, everyone. And we look forward to meeting you again next week Vani ji. Thank you, everybody. Tomorrow at 11:30, we have Sri Krishna Pani ji's talk. He's talking to us on Tattva Bodha, so do join. And as usual, next Thursday, we have our satsang. I would like you to tell more and more people about these study sessions that are being conducted. We have migrated from Zoom to Cisco for the simple reason we wanted more and more people. We can accommodate 1,000 people. So kindly do tell people about these satsangs and these study sessions. Thank you, everyone. Be safe, be happy, and thank you, Vaniji, again.
Thank you,
Sajni,
Sajni. Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
Sajni,
yes.
for these next session tomorrow and on satsang, is
Right.
it also online? But what
So
about
these are
its
all
link? I've not received the link. Last time I gave my mobile number.
Just give it again. Aniket, will you take her number and add her to our WhatsApp group, please? Kindly give your number and you will be added to the WhatsApp group. Anyone else
Okay.
who wants to
Yeah.
get our notification?
Please leave your numbers on the chat box.
Yes,
Okay.
please give your numbers. We will
Okay.
include. All right,
Oh,
Usha, we will
okay.
include.
Okay.
Anybody
Thank
else
you.
who
Thank
wants-
you.
You're most welcome. Anyone else who would like to be on our WhatsApp group and get notifications, kindly leave your number and you will be included. Right? Thank you so much.
Yes, I'm just taking the numbers. Give me 1 second.